What's up guys, JC Sense here, kind of doing this a little bit old school style. Phil's actually at home today getting fiber installed. Yeah, can't say I blame him for being like, I need time off because I'm finally getting good internet at home. So here we go, old school style where I'm kind of filming for myself today because Nick's doing some other projects for me. So moving on, we're talking about Lian-Li's new SL wireless LCD 120 fans. Yeah, you heard me right, wireless. It's kind of an interesting word to use considering there are wires on this. But anyway, we're gonna talk about these. It's kind of Lian-Li's next iteration of the uni fans, which are extremely popular. And yeah, we'll kind of go through what you get, what you need, things you should know, and how they connect to your system. The Q60 thick CPU cooler from Height features a hinged 5-inch ultra slim IPS 720 by 1280 display, a 60 Hz refresh rate, and 300 nit brightness, offering unique customization for your build. The Q60 also features Height's revolutionary digital hardware interface, Nexus Link, for sequential lighting and cooling control, with both thermal and positioning sensor data using a single cable, and supports up to 34 devices and 2 channels with Nexus Link amp scale. With the 53mm thick 240 radiator with 32mm thick FP12 fans, keep your CPU nice and cool for those long gaming sessions. To see the full list of features, specs, and supported CPU sockets, follow the sponsored link in the description below. Okay, so we have a few different things going on here. We have a few 3-packs. We have a LED version, or obviously the non-LCD. So we've seen the LCDs before. They're not new. It's where they put a screen in the hub of the fan. So it's got a 1.6-inch LCD screen. It's not new. We've seen this before in previous versions of the fan. Actually, they seem nearly identical to the previous version, minus the wireless aspect of it. But you could put things like PNGs on there, JPEGs, GIFs, little moving animations, or you can use the L-Connect 3 software, which will allow you to turn each one into kind of its own sensor panel. Like I said, nothing new with that. These are reverse blade though. We'll show you that in a sec. I love that reverse blades are kind of becoming a thing now because so many fans now, or so many cases I should say, bring fan air in through either the motherboard tray, like the backside panel, or with the front being visible to the side of the case, depending how you orient it. Just seeing the fan cage there is really ugly. So fan manufacturers have realized, hey, if we reverse pitch the blades and kind of reverse the whole fan design, then you get the pretty side showing. Obviously, this would be like first world problems when it comes to computer building because you're paying a premium for that sort of stuff. This is the non-LCD version though, so that's what's different about a couple of these sets. So what was sent to me here is kind of enough fans to sort of outfit like a Lian-Li 011 Dynamic XL. Don't know where I'm gonna put these yet. Maybe I'll do a build in that, I don't know, we'll see. But we have LCD version, non-LCD version, actually 2 non-LCD versions. These, being the reverse blade, would actually be perfect in the Lian-Li like 011, or honestly any dual chamber case that gives you 3 120mm fan vertical right next to the motherboard, because the LCD screens on the fan hub would be facing you. And then we have just a couple of single packs right here of the actual LCD fans themselves. But if you're gonna be using the wireless specifically, you're gonna need to get yourself one of the combo packs. And we'll talk about why right now as we unbox it. All right, so we'll start with the 3-pack here, the reverse blades. As mentioned, you're gonna need the 3-pack because the controller that is necessary comes with the 3-pack. The individual fans themselves, they do not come with the controller that is needed to run the wireless aspect of the fan. In fact, these are intended to be more so just like an expansion to the 3-pack. So I need to point that out. So you get our fan screws, pretty standard. We get this SATA breakout cable that terminates into 3 PWM 4-pin fan headers. Important to keep in mind though, if we look closely at this, there's only 2 pins per each one, and it's only the 2 pins that the fans need to be able to get power. All the rest of the control, as mentioned for speed and all that, is done through the wireless controller. So what they've essentially just done is removed any of the data that makes its way to the fan. It just gets power and ground. So that is one thing that's massively different. So if we take a look at the actual cable here, this is why so many people are saying this is not a wireless setup, because as you can see, there is absolutely wires. And to be honest, just as many of them as you would find in the wired fans. So really, it's wireless with an asterisk, because all you're getting that's wireless is the data control for the lighting as well as the fan speed that makes its way to the fan itself. Okay, so that's the actual cable itself. This is going to be the controller, as I mentioned. I believe this, yep, here it is. So the controller can be powered two different ways. This is the cable harness to run the controller. So you can see it has a proprietary pin out on one side, a little special plug, and then we get a USB 2.0 header plug, as well as our actual fan plug right here. So this is what allows it to communicate with the motherboard. So if you wanted to let the motherboard fan logic or fan stepping system, like I mentioned, this would be able to see that and then communicate it back to the fans, so you don't have to use the L-Connect software to control the fan speed. You can do it through your motherboard. Okay, so here's the actual controller itself. Extremely small versus, it's not like I've ever heard that before. Anyway, extremely small versus the previous controllers, and it can connect to your system in two ways. One, you pop this cap off, you get a USB-A, so it kind of looks like a giant USB drive at this point. This would be sticking up on the top of your system or sticking out the back. This would not be my preferred method for using this, only because you expose it to getting damaged if you move your system or you plug in a cable or you yank let's say you yank your mouse or your keyboard because it gets hung up, you could break this. Doesn't feel like it's entirely the most rigid thing, so I wouldn't feel comfortable using the USB-A. Or the other end right here, which plugs into this harness, as I already mentioned, which means that you would be able to then have this set, behind your motherboard tray or something like that. So right now it doesn't seem to have any double-sided sticky tape or anything like that. I didn't have it plugged in all the way, obviously. But we need to see whether or not we get any of that. But this would be pretty easy to hide anywhere in your system. It's pretty tiny. It's a lot smaller than the other controllers. And then here are our three fans right here. Now, one thing I need to point out about the quote-unquote white versions of the Lian-Li fans, they're not like a pure white. They're almost like an extremely light gray. The problem with white systems is you get a white power supply, a white motherboard, a white case, white fans, white cables. They all have like a slightly different shade of white. And then it starts to be very, very annoying until you start blasting it with light, like RGB or whatever, then it sort of like blends in where everything matches. But whatever Lian-Li is using for their plastic, they just don't, they're not crisp. I don't know how to explain it. They're very gray, if that makes sense. Anyway, as you can see here, these are the LCD fans, reverse blade. So the air is actually moving through the cage side first towards the LCD. So you can get these obviously in standard or reverse blade. These are reverse blade, as you can see. They interlock together just like every other Lian-Li fan in the past. You got these notches right here on the top. You've got your pins, and then you just orient it the correct way on the notches, slide them together. This will plug on to the side with the pogo pins. So if you look on one side of the fans, you can see that they are contact pads. The other side of the fans are pogo pins. It's in the center of the fan, so that makes it kind of nice. So if you need to switch the direction based on the way that the cables are coming out, you can do that. And then this is the, like I said, this is the wireless connection, if you will. So I can pop this guy off, and then I can take these fan wires and plop them out the other side if I need them going the other way. That way, if I'm using them on an AIO or something, these aren't coming out facing you. They could be flipped to the other side to make sure they're facing the back of the motherboard tray. That way you can have cleaner cable management and routing. Okay, so that's everything that you get with the 3-pack. So this is what you need to control your setup. Any other fans that you get, including any other 3-packs, you don't need to set up the controller for every pack. One controller is expandable up to, I believe it said 10 channels of the quote-unquote wireless devices. And that includes the wireless streamers and any other wireless devices that come out with in the future. So it allows you to have, you might be asking yourself why they came out with this, but actually it's come up to that. We'll come back to that, Phil, sorry. Okay, so that's that 3-pack right there. There's our controller and our fan cables. You might be asking yourself why you would use this guy right here. I'll be honest, I'm not entirely sure why we would use this guy right here. I guess I'd have to start installing these in a case to figure out the instance at which I would want to use these. I guess this is just so if I don't want to have the cable running to, say, a motherboard for the actual fan harness itself. I guess this is so that you can just, remember I said it only needs 12 volt and ground. It doesn't need any variable power. So you can run it off just the SATA cable. And then because we have 3 splitters on here, it allows us to have 3 groups of fans getting power from the same source. So realistically, it would lead to a more cleaner type of cable management. Let's take a look at what you get with the single fan, because like I was saying, this is realistically designed to be an expansion pack, not intended to be used by itself, although I guess you probably could if you stuck it, say, in the back, like exhaust or something. Obviously, it wouldn't be the reverse blade if it was an exhaust, but yeah, so here's everything you get with it. Again, the quick start guide that shows you how to hook it up. There's our Lian-Li L-Connect download link. 4 fan screws, and basically the exact same plug that you get that comes with the fan itself. So this is a USB header, and then this is the fan plug as I already showed. I guess you could technically just have this plugged in via USB, and then could get, I guess, its signal through the USB header. I should test that, because then it's no longer wireless at that point. Where this really comes in handy is the fact that you're not gonna have to have data connections all over the place going into a singular hub. But one of the things that's gonna sort of be a problem here is because each grouping of fans, and you can go up to 4 fans in a grouping, so this is 3, I'd have room for 1 more fan. Each group needs its own USB 2.0 header. So a lot of motherboards, especially modern motherboards, are using USB-C and USB 3.0 and put only 2 USB 2 headers on there. Now don't forget, the fan controller harness itself also needs the header. So one grouping alone, so the 3 fans, or the 4, up to 4, and the controller would utilize basically all the 2.0 headers that are in my system, because the board I'm looking at right next to me only has 2 on there. There's only 2 headers. Means if I go to add another fan, like another grouping, well, we're out of headers. So that's a downside of using USB 2.0. You're gonna have to use a 2.0 splitter of some sort, or a USB 3.0 that breaks out into 2.0 or something. So that's a major downside of this, is the fact that you have to use USB 2.0 headers. And they are becoming less relevant, or I guess relevant and prevalent on motherboards these days. Okay, let's get this sort of mocked up on my test bench here so we can see what kind of control we get, and I guess how responsive it is. Good news, Phil's back, so the camera's gonna move, and he has fiber internet now. Okay, so I'm gonna give you a demonstration as to why you should be using the SATA powered breakout cable for the devices and not motherboard headers. So here's the fan, the 3 fans with the LCDs, reverse blade I've already plugged in, as I told you. Here is the controller, which is also wired into USB 2.0. My 2 USB headers are now completely utilized. I don't have the other fan sets in here. As I showed you, even the single fan requires a USB header. So it's kind of like we just moved the problem of wiring in this quote-unquote wireless fan set to now add more wires, in my opinion. The difference is they're not just all going to a hub, which is where they used to go before. We'll talk about the benefits to the wireless in a moment, because I'm sure by now a lot of people are going like, what's the gimmick here then? Why is it quote-unquote wireless? It'll sort of make sense as we demonstrate this. But what I want to show you is what happens if you take the fan and you plug it into, say, a chassis header, even if that header is set to full speed. So if I turn on the system right now, the fans are gonna turn on, but watch what happens. Look at the RGB. It's like freaking out because the header's not at 100% yet, because it kind of does a ramp up. Now we have full power. So this is why it's just best, I think, for the health of the power system, to not have it seeing anything less than 12 volts, which is what it wants to see. That's why we need to just use the breakout SATA cable. If you power it on with the SATA cable plugged in, it doesn't do that blinky stuff. Also too, this is an NZXT USB 2.0 breakout like hub that gives us more USB headers. Obviously right now I would need to use this if I was gonna add any more fans or any of their other wireless devices, like their streamers. So the streamers are their RGB, like 24 pin and EPS. I think they have EPS, I don't remember, but they also have PCI Express and 12 volt power, like cable sleeves that are all RGB crazy. Each of those also need USB 2.0. So you would have to use something like this now. So now we're adding a third-party device that is needed to, I don't know if Lian-Li sells one. If they do, great, but it's another thing you'd have to buy. So that's a downside. Something else I think is incredibly odd. So as you can see right here, all the same stuff we've showed already before. I set the middle one here to just like, I don't know if you can pick that up very easily. It's kind of bright in this room, but CPU at the top, GPU at the bottom, because they could be center panels. That's just a neat animation that they have. You can change it to anything that you want. So let's say we click on the SL wireless fan utility. If we click on the fan blade, we can change our fan profiles. I mentioned earlier I didn't like their fan profiles because I felt like they weren't granular enough. They've updated this since I've last messed with it. We have a lot of movement that we can do on the curve. So this is nice. You can truly dial in this curve to ramp based on temp where you want it. So that's nice. I retract what I say about the fact that the older software I didn't like, it was too aggressive on the stepping. It was like 400 RPM kind of increments, but they've changed that obviously. If you click on the actual LCD screen, that brings up the LCD hub, and then you can change that to other things. So I could make that one, I don't know, let's go make it not an animation, a sensor. Let's make that one GPU. And then we'll make the bottom one, oh, I don't know, Captain J. So we'll do picture. There it is, I'd already uploaded it. And there's Captain J down there. And then if you just need to click this little button that has a little square with a rotation at the bottom, that is how you just quick and easily rotate the screen. I think other brands can take note on that because some brands, oops, I think I was doing it too fast. There we go. So everything else about these is exactly as you would expect. They're uni fans. They're the latest iteration now, which is wirelessly connecting to this thing. Now you might be asking yourself, Jay, it's plugged into the USB 2.0 header. Why do you need this? So I wondered, if I was to unplug this, would we still have control over the fans? If so, then that would make this completely useless. Well, check this out. Everything disappeared as soon as I unplugged this. Everything's still going. It's retaining the settings on the fans themselves. But as soon as you unplug the wireless controller, you lose any control over the fans. One thing I also need to point out, wireless, it does not do motherboard sync for lighting. Because I don't know if you noticed, this is not actually integrating with the motherboard RGB header in any way. So that's one functionality you lose by going with the wireless setup versus the traditional setup. Is the old controller had a 3-pin ARGB header that you could plug into the motherboard, so you could choose Lian-Li L-Connect for lighting or sync with the motherboard devices. So you lose that now by going with the wireless. So you just saw that by me having the controller unplugged, even though the USB header was plugged into the motherboard, we have no control over the fans. That's because it is still using whichever wireless connection it's using. I don't know if it's 2.4 gigahertz or not. I should put on the screen here. I didn't look that up. Bad Jay, you suck. I know, don't worry, I'm working on it. This exists because of one reason and one reason only. The only way to add more devices without adding more controller is to do that wirelessly. And as I mentioned, it does 10 wireless channels with 6 different firmware types. So I have 3 fans right here. If I added another fan, and then I have the rear fan, and I have the other fans in the front, that's one firmware type. So that's only using one channel as one firmware type. The streamers are obviously another firmware type. So this has to mean there's other wireless devices maybe that Lian-Li's coming out with in the future, maybe case lighting, right? The O11 has always had like strip lighting and stuff in there. So that means there has to be forward-facing devices that are also going to be wireless. So right now, it's kind of like, it's not getting rid of any wires. Honestly, you just moved where the wires are going. Now, instead of having a data cable plugging in directly to a controller, we now have which assumes to be getting power over USB, not data, going now to whatever hub we need to plug in enough of our devices. So is it really wireless? I mean, that's why these fans are kind of getting beat up online, because it's like wireless asterisks. The interaction with them and the software is what's wireless. But I think a lot of people were thinking that you were going to have, like I thought personally, I was going to have one power wire to this, and then everything else would be wireless. But the USB 2.0 plug itself completely just removes any idea of it being beneficial for a wiring purpose. I think what we want in a wireless device is less wires, not just as many, and then having to add another thing to be able to plug them in, adding more wires than we probably would have had in the first place, because this also has a SATA power that it needs, and it has obviously the link cable that has to be able to take this to daisy chain off of. So we've added all this to our wireless device plus this. The difference is now we can more cleanly, I think, sort of route and mount these cables where we want to, because now if all we need is to plug the wireless or the fan headers into this SATA splitter, or honestly, you could use any sort of hub splitter as long as it's getting power from 12 volt and not the motherboard header. If you're going to use a motherboard header, you need to go into the BIOS and make sure it's set to full speed. That way it's getting full 12 volts. Switch it from PWM to DC, and then just deal with the blinky blink as you start the system, because it doesn't immediately turn on 12 volt, it always ramps. For fan health and such, those headers always ramp up to 12 volts. They don't just click on 12 volts, because that's better for the motor to have a slow voltage ramp than to just punch it with 12 volts immediately. I don't know if that's gonna be bad for these fans in the long run. So I would recommend just using a straight power hub that gives you the 12 volts directly to your fans. I can only think of those two devices so far right now that are wireless. Apparently, they have plans for 6, so there's that. Other than that, if you just don't really buy into any of the wireless, I guess, I don't want to call it a gimmick because it is wireless. It's just, I think it's a little disingenuous to call them wireless fans when it's just wireless data connection. But the problem with wireless devices, in my opinion, for the same reason why you have to find the perfect placement for your wireless keyboard and mouse dongles, is per FCC rules, all wireless devices must accept interference. I also need to point out that looks very pink. It's set to red. Like, that's very red. There it goes. Like, it didn't apply the first time. Let's talk about price. Okay, so the triple pack of the non-LCD, which are these guys right here, as I already showed, on Amazon right now currently, are 90 bucks. So it's basically the same price, and that's not the reverse fan. I know the reverse fan has a different price, but the non-reverse fans are 90 bucks. That makes them essentially 30 bucks a fan, or whatever the price of the controller and on the wiring and all that stuff is. So probably more like really $25 a fan. That's basically the standard like uni price, to be honest. It doesn't seem like they've increased the cost to have the wireless, so that's kind of nice. But if we look at the LCD version, they're $135 for the triple pack. Again, very comparable to what they were prior to the wireless ones coming out. So if I look for the non-wireless, the Uni TL LCD 120 are 120 now. So you're paying basically 15 bucks for the wireless aspect of it. I don't think that's a terrible premium, but the fact that you can at least have your devices connected to this without having to run wires to it does allow for some cleaner install. Now, I'm at least happy to see that this isn't like 20% more expensive or something crazy like that, 20, 30% more expensive. It is more expensive, but that's for you as the buyer and the consumer to decide whether or not that price is worth it to you. I'm at least happy to see there's some innovation happening. Lian-Li really is the brand that's been pushing like the innovation when it comes to fans and stuff. There's only so many ways you could design a round thing that pushes air or pulls air, depending on its orientation. It's stuff like this that at least allows you to be able to kind of spice up your system if you're looking for something like that. There's always going to be this struggle publicly with people that are like form over function and function with form. So I like form as much as function, and I'm willing to pay for that. You may not be, which means that this would not be for you. A couple other honorable mentions that I forgot to mention. There's these little rubber plugs that plug the fan screw holes. So that's kind of nice. The other versions didn't have that, where you would just see the fan head or the screw head sticking through. So you pop these little rubber grommets out, put the screw through, and then you pop that back in. So it just gives it an even cleaner look. I did notice though that there's a little bit extra flex with the cage design on these. The other ones were actually very firm. I used to joke around that you could use them as like a club or a battering ram, but there is a little more wobble and flex. But again, these are gonna be mounted to a case or a radiator or something, so that shouldn't be a problem. And then yeah, these are 28 mil, which means you have a little bit extra fan pitch, which means you have extra static pressure and more airflow. I think 28 mil is quickly becoming the more standard fan size for a lot of manufacturers moving forward. So you need to keep that in mind. If you have a very tight fit between, let's say you're gonna put these on a radiator, a 30 mil radiator, and a 25 mil fan, so 55 millimeters is the typical thickness you need to make sure that you have set aside for like a radiator with AIO and such. Some cases, There's not a lot of room between that and maybe interfering something on your motherboard. So you need to keep in mind, sometimes the extra 3mm is a little too much. So you need to keep that in mind with these. But a lot of cases these days have enough space that that's not becoming an issue. Only becomes a problem if you're gonna throw these into an older case where space is already a premium. All right, there we go. Sound off down in the comments below how you guys feel about the wireless LCD fans. Excuse me, I meant wireless LCD fans from Lian-Li. Personally, for me, I'm conflicted because I like the fact that we can tuck all the wires away and we don't have to run that fan connector to that hub. I do like that. And it would allow for a cleaner install. Things I wish would change though, I've already mentioned this at the beginning of the video. Phil hasn't heard, but I'm sure he'll agree. Make them more white and less gray looking. Lian-Li's white products have always looked gray. Here is a white mouse next to a Lian-Li white product. So we need more of this, less of this. There we go. Sound off down below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.